All right, hello and welcome to the Grimm Times podcast, episode number 10. Today on the show, we are going to have a very special guest. I've been trying to get him on for a while now. I've known him for about a decade almost. It's crazy to think, as of this fall, we'll know each other for about a decade now. Since I was 14, I started Tae Kwon Do, and then I'm 24 now, so he's a longtime friend of mine, very accomplished martial artist, with focus on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and various other forms. He's a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo, and that is under the STA banner, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. He currently runs a school in Bolivar, Missouri, and let's bring him in now. Johnny, how are you doing?
Okay, I'm all right, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm good. It sounds like you're pulling out one of your characters from the Jeff Jarman show.
All right. I'll keep out with that.
Cheap plug for the show there.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, so I want to talk today about a few different things. For starters, what got you interested in Taekwondo?
Well, actually, originally I started Taekwondo when I was about 9 years old, which was about over 20 years ago. And basically, we was just at a this fairground thing, and when they was giving out like a free week of Taekwondo for anybody that joined up then, and my brother and I had actually joined up then and did it for almost a year. So, it was just something to do, getting us out of the house, basically what our parents were aiming for. And so then whenever I joined back up about 10 years later or so, I actually just started back out at the lowest belt because it'd been so long since I've did Taekwondo. And actually whenever I started back with our instructor, your instructor as well, we was actually starting out with private lessons in Jiu-Jitsu, and then he talked me into joining back in Taekwondo. So, and I remembered how much I liked it the first time, and I was like, oh, what the heck? So, and that was about 12 years ago or so that I started Taekwondo back again.
At that point, did you really think about one day you might be running a school of your own?
No, not essentially, no, but for instance, like the school that I have now, the students that I have, they seem very eager, very willing, and loving it. And then I kind of progress, like, once you got, I tell them, once you guys get your own school, that, there's certain things you got to look out for. And whenever I say stuff like that, it makes their eyes go wide, like, oh, I never even thought about that.
Huh.
So whenever I started back with our instructor, Randy, he never really said anything about us starting our own school and everything, so the thought never really crossed our mind at that point of belt rank, I guess you can say, lower belt rank.
With so many different things out there, different forms of exercise, you've got dance, you've got gymnastics and jogging, track, all these different things, lots of different sports out there too. That definitely, I would guess, has to affect the amount of students that we get there in Taekwondo. It's kind of a loaded question, I guess. Do you think it's better to play sports in school like basketball rather than do Taekwondo, or do you think Taekwondo is better than most everything, most sports like that?
Well, okay, let's just put it this way. Taekwondo is year-round. Your sports, you go on for 3 to 4 months at a time. And usually also those type of sports are just for throughout the summer or throughout the winter. Again, Taekwondo is year-round. You get all sorts of different kinds of exercises, no matter what kind of physical activity you do, which a big thing now is really Zumba and aerobics classes, which again is workout, exercise. But also with Taekwondo, you're learning self-defense. You're learning, basically how to defend yourself against whatever. With soccer, yeah, you can kick really hard. Okay. But
Yeah.
What if you can't kick the person? In football, you can tackle the person. But, what happens if they draw a knife on you or something? You still going to try to tackle them? I doubt it. Zumba, you're just going to dance them to death. I don't know.
So I think basically what we're saying here is overall, martial arts would be definitely better for a life aspect of it, I guess, if you're into that kind of thing. If you're not into that and you just want to play basketball or something like that, then that keeps you healthy, I guess, while you're in school. You can't really do it after school, though. And with martial arts, you can do that for years and years, and actually, it'll keep you fit long into your older ages.
Correct. Yeah. And for instance, like I've known martial artists, masters, and stuff like that that are in their 50s and 60s, and they don't look that old because they're still physically active in the martial arts community. So it makes you look young while still feeling young.
And
I mean, there is perks no matter what you do, but that's just my opinion about it. I mean, Taekwondo is cool. You know, if you do choose a type of martial arts, whatever it might be, you know, pick the right one and stick with it. Because, for instance, Taekwondo, I see myself doing it the rest of my life. You know, it's a lifelong thing to just better yourself, better the people around you, help everybody out, to learn self-defense, or just a form of exercise.
Well, I'm a secondary black belt in Taekwondo as well, and we came up together through the ranks. And I owned a school for a little while, and one thing I noticed, I don't think I ran mine quite as long as you. I think you've passed me in the amount of months. Because how long has your school been up?
Almost 2 years now.
Yeah, so I think mine was maybe just under a year. But I think one thing that I noticed is you've got some students who come in and they come in because they actually want to do it or they've seen something like that. But then you've got the younger kids who their parents have kind of forced them into it and not necessarily the child themselves want to be there that badly. So how do you deal with that kind of thing? And do you think it's kind of a 50-50 deal, like half of them actually want to be there and then half are just going through the motions?
No, that is actually correct. 50% want to be there. The other 50% are forced to go there, so they do, 50% of what they're told to do, or if that even. Then the ones that definitely want to be there, they listen to the instructor. They try to do their best that they can. The other ones just lollygag, and that's when the instructor keeps on having to get onto the student, which I even had a few months ago. I think he was 15 years old. We're doing just exercise in class and stuff, and I happen to look up, and he's looking out the window. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And I really thought that he wanted to come join the class. That's why his mom approached me about him wanting to join the class. And then I guess just everybody's different about what they expect whenever they come to martial arts class. I guess they're thinking that they're going to be doing all sorts of flips and tricks and stuff like that. And, we're the type of organization that we don't go to tournaments, and because it's all about points at tournaments, who can hit the other person the first, not actually learning a trade to self-defense. Like, okay, yeah, I just hit the guy, but he's still coming after me. What do I do then? Well, you went to the wrong Taekwondo organization.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those deals where tournaments have gotten so political nowadays. Plus,
yeah.
I mean, the way that their point system works, it seems like you can score a point, but it's not really a vital hit on the guy, or it's not really going to do much to him. It's just a point, and so therefore it kind of nullifies any self-defense aspect of it.
Correct. Very true, yes.
So kind of down that same alley, though, what do you think is the youngest age that a child should be when they start Taekwondo? Because sometimes I think, 5 years old might be a little too young.
That depends on the kid. I mean, I've seen kids come in there at 4 years old. They would love to be in there and have talent and attention and can do whatever you ask of them. I mean, it's just like, but you have, every kid's different. You have some that they're 8 years old and you just want to just throw them across the room, but you can't. And then you have those ones that are just, 5 and they're just like perfect. It's like, oh, this is like the best student I've ever had and probably ever will have, But it's like I said, though, it depends on the kid, genetics, how they was raised.
And along those same lines, I know some organizations will give out the black belt rank to younger people. Some even under the age of 12. And personally, I don't agree with that. I think they should at least be over 12. I would say 14 or 15 at minimum. What's your opinion on that?
Well, a while back in the local newspaper, there was I believe a 5 or 6 year old got a black belt.
Wow.
And
yeah.
I'm like, they went through the motions and the technique, but black belt in our organization refers to no fear of evil, no fear of darkness. I'm sure this kid has about 3 or 4 nightlights still on when he sleeps. um, and it's just one of those kids, it's like, I could still just drop kick you across the room. Don't really feel like he's any kind of threat, which I'm not saying, we're all threat after we become black belt, but it's just like, I don't really see how that was possible because, in our organization, 3 years max before you get your first degree black belt. So if you do start at 5, 8 years old, if you're a black belt, cool. If not, my thoughts is if the kid has put in the time and he's good enough that the judges think or the other instructors think that, hey, he's awesome at what he does, he represents us good, then yes, I do believe that black belt would be correct.
Yeah, and it's tough with that kind of thing because you've got the parents who are going to pay for the kid to go to Taekwondo and say
Correct.
you've got a 9-year-old and he's almost to that rank of black belt, like maybe he started really young. And I think it took me personally 4 years to get black belt, and that's pretty average, I think, for our organization, again, the STA. So say you have like an 8-year-old who is just about ready for black belt. Like he must have started really young. And then you've got these parents who are paying the bills and they expect to see their kid progress through the ranks and everything. And so it would be hard to hold that kid back for, 3 or 4 years, 3 or 4 more years when he's technically, ready to test. But then again, sometimes that might be just what you have to do because, it would make the kid more determined in the long run. But I mean, it's just hard when people look at a 9-year-old and see him as black belt. And then, they're like, how are you supposed to take the other black belts seriously if this 25-year-old black belt is the same rank as a 9-year-old? I mean, it kind of discredits the older person, I would think, a little bit.
Okay, yes. I see what you mean there, yeah. But, of course, also, both of them put in their amount of time. With black belt, you go through the motion, you do the stuff, you get aces across the board or whatever, and I don't know. I think that's kind of a touchy subject on most people. But a lot of times when a kid is that young, starting out, especially like in our organization or whatever, they lose interest. Now, for instance, there's other organizations where the kid will get a black belt within a year. So yeah, that's definitely not a black belt. I don't see how that's possible. But
Yeah.
like I said, a lot of kids, they go, oh man, 4 years from now, I'm going to be a black belt. It's like, maybe I'll start back up later or something. So a lot of times, the majority of the time, they will just drop out or just lose interest, and then they'll go on something else. Which also, at that time of their life, at that age, sports come in a heavy factor. Summer comes along, you got baseball, you got football, whatever. So they kind of just drop Taekwondo completely. Because just for instance, recently I just had somebody just come back. They just got their yellow belt. I just tested them for yellow belt before they quit for baseball. So then they come back, they've already got another year on their age or something. And 3 months later they come back, which, 3 months time I probably would have already tested him for high yellow, but they weren't there. So I'm just starting him back, or he's still at the yellow phase. So then by the time next summer comes along, he might be a green belt and then quits again for baseball or basketball or whatever. So a lot of times sports come into factor at that age of a student, and also interest or loss of interest.
Well, that's actually a good point, talking about losing interest, because, I think the original Taekwondo belt system consisted of far less belts than we have today. Like you had white, yellow, green, blue, so on. And now we have white, yellow, and then, green, then high green, then blue. And so there's a lot more belts, which does equal the, these people having to pay more money for the testings. But then again, it also gives them a sense of accomplishment and, that they are actually progressing. And if they don't feel like they're progressing, then they definitely lose interest. And So I'm sure you've seen that sometimes hurt your school a little bit if they don't progress fast enough.
Yeah, yeah, I do see that in the school, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
You can't force the student to come to class.
yeah,
You can just tell them what's going on, when they're getting ready to test, and this is what's expected of them. And if they can't meet those criteria, then they don't test. And then sometimes when they go, oh, well, he's not testing me even though my 3 months is up. Yeah, well, the instructor doesn't think you're ready to test. You're still having trouble with something. And even though the student thinks, oh, yeah, my form is perfect. I've got one student like that right now. He goes, oh, my form's perfect. I'm like, okay, let's see it. And every third movement, he's messing up. And I'm like, okay, let's fix that problem before you test. And he should have already tested by now, but he's still having issues with the form or the one steps or whatever. So, yeah, it's really, an instructor thinks that they're not ready or they don't show up but yeah, you can't force students to come to class. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
But you can't do
that. What do you think about, because when you and I were coming up, our instructor had us, I think it used to be more of this, but they used to invent these games for Taekwondo. Like you would have a game called Open Season where everyone stands around, and then it's pretty much a free-for-all as far as the sparring goes. And then they've got the other games where you stand in a circle and each person kicks the other person's hand, like you hold it up and you just go in a big circle. And there was the one drill where you do like a roundhouse kick and you go all the way down the floor and you have to tag somebody's hand and then come all the way back, and that's like a speed drill but also technique. How important do you think those games really are as far as actual Taekwondo goes?
Well, I think they're important because it breaks the monotony of the whole class. It's something different. It's something the kid kind of looks forward to. It's like, hey, something different. I still do that. There's actually other games we've invented to where it's like you hold a plastic cup in your hand, flatten your hand, and then tell the other student what kick you want them to do to kick that cup out of your hand without touching the hand. Works technique, But yeah, it breaks up the monotony of the class. Because if you keep coming in the classroom doing the exact same thing every time, it gets kind of boring after a while. Yeah. So if you switch it up a little bit, like for instance, I have a handheld bag, a kicking bag, and the little one, that's all I had whenever I was teaching class. So then now I've acquired 2 stand-up bags, the ones that are water-filled base. Yeah. And I basically push them out to the center, push them really close together, have everybody stand in a line, and have them do certain combo kicks on the bag, or combo kicks with some punches or something like that. That also helps them with balance control, technique, distance, stuff like that. So, I mean, it changes stuff up. Because, like if you go to like high school or whatever grade you're in listening to this or whatever, if you keep going to class and learning the same word problems over again or same math problems over again, it's like, yeah, I got this. Can we do something different? So that helps out to where it keeps the kids interested. That's what we try to help out instead of just doing, forms, one-step stretches, forms, one-step stretches.
Right. Well, we're out of time here on the Grimm Times podcast. We're going to go ahead and bring Johnny back for the next episode, and I'm going to ask him a few more questions and kind of wrap up our discussion on Taekwondo here. So, for Skylar Sylvie and Johnny Kirkland, I'm Jeff Jarman, and we'll catch you next time on the Grimm Times podcast.
In jiu-jitsu, and then he talked me into joining back in Taekwondo. So, and I remembered how much I liked it the first time, and I was like, oh, what the heck? So, and that was about 12 years ago or so that I started Taekwondo back again.
At that point, did you really think about one day you might be running a school of your own?
No, not essentially, no. But for instance, like the school that I have now, the students that I have, they seem very eager, very willing, and loving it. And then I kind of progress, like, once you got, I tell them, once you guys get your own school, that, there's certain things you got to look out for. And whenever I say stuff like that, it makes her.
All right, hello and welcome to the Grimm Times podcast, episode number 10. Today on the show, we are going to have a very special guest. I've been trying to get him on for a while now. I've known him for about a decade almost. It's crazy to think, as of this fall, we'll know each other for about a decade now. Since I was 14, I started Taekwondo, and then I'm 24 now. So he's a longtime friend of mine, very accomplished martial artist with focus on Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and various other forms. He's a third degree black belt in Taekwondo, and that is under the STA banner, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. He currently runs a school in Bolivar, Missouri, and let's bring him in now. Johnny, how are you doing?
Okay, I'm all right, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm good. It sounds like you're pulling out one of your characters from the Jeff Jarman show.
All right. I'll keep out with that.
Cheap plug for the show there.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Uh, yeah, so I want to talk today about a few different things. For starters, what got you interested in Taekwondo?
Well, actually, originally I started Taekwondo when I was about 9 years old, which was about over 20. Your eyes go wide, like, oh, I never even thought about that.
Huh.
So whenever I started back with our instructor Randy, he never really said anything about us starting our own school and everything. So the thought never really crossed our mind at that point of belt rank, I guess you can say, lower belt rank.
With so many different things out there, different forms of exercise. You know, you've got dance, you've got gymnastics and jogging, track. You know, all these different things. And lots of different sports out there too. Um, that definitely, I would guess, has to affect the amount of students that we get there in Taekwondo. It's kind of a loaded question, I guess. Do you think it's better to play sports in school?
Years ago. Um, and basically we was just at a this fairground thing, and when they was giving out like a free week of taekwondo for anybody that joined up then, and my brother and I had actually joined up then and did it for almost a year. So it was just something to do, getting us out of the house, basically what our parents were aiming for. And so then whenever I joined back up about 10 years later or so, I actually just started back out at the lowest belt because it'd been so long since I did Taekwondo. And yeah, actually, whenever I started back with our instructor, your instructor as well, we was actually starting out with private lessons